everybody, welcome in. And so tonight I'm going to be joined by the incredible Shahroo Izadi, who is an amazing behavioral change therapist and author of a book called The Kindness Method. We have already done an incredible Walk Talk podcast with her. So if you haven't listened to it, I highly encourage you to do so. It's wonderful. We're going to talk a lot about it tonight anyway, but definitely have a listen. And if you have listened to it, amazing. I'm sure you enjoyed it. And you're in for a treat tonight, whether you've listened to it or whether you haven't. So Shahroo is an incredible author. She is an awesome all-round human being. And I'm so excited to be sharing the screen with her tonight to be talking about a very important topic, which is being kind to yourself, okay? We're going to talk all about the life-changing benefits of being kind to yourself. It's a topic I feel really strongly about, and obviously Shahroo does as well. So without further ado, I will introduce you to Shahroo. It is so incredible to have you with us. Welcome. Please do say hi, and then we'll get cracking with some questions.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. You know, ever since I've been working with you guys, I've been getting loads of wonderful feedback. And so I can really feel that it's like a very like-minded community. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it definitely is. And a lot of what you speak about has like resonated with me so personally as well. And I've definitely been trying to spread the kindness method love on our team pages and to our members, because it really is a life-changing way of, you know, speaking to yourself and treating yourself. So please tell us a bit more about what you do, what your philosophy is, and how you came to do it.
Thank you. I essentially help people to change habits. And my whole purpose is to hand over tools that I wish I had had before, whenever I would try to change habits. And for many, many, many years, since the age of like 10 or 11, I was either gaining or losing enormous amounts of weight on these really grueling, punitive diets. And that were doing nothing for my self-esteem, and just being really mean to myself about my body, about the way that I ate. And after I did my master's, I went, and the first placement that I did, the first psychology assistant placement that I did, was at an addiction center. And I realized there that so much of what was helping people to not engage in behaviors that were problematic for them around substance misuse or gambling, whatever else, was totally relevant to what I was trying to do in terms of my weight loss and my weight management. And I realized that so much of it, what it had in common was that it was based in compassion. It was based in like really getting to know yourself better, liking yourself more, believing in yourself more, and ultimately taking the same advice you would give someone you love and trying to understand why you weren't doing that. And so I applied it to myself, and I ended up losing an enormous amount of weight and have kept it off for the first time in my life without really focusing on food or exercise at all. And I'm focusing almost entirely on how to like myself more and how to close that gap between the advice that I'd give a person I love and the advice that I take myself. And so that's what I do now. And I wrote another book called The Last Diet, which was very much about that, which was about like, it was the same framework as the kindness method, which is made up of all these exercises that were like, they're free. You could do them on a napkin. You know, I was signing up for these things that were hundreds and hundreds of pounds. And, you know, everybody wants like a miracle or a guru or something. And you also don't want to hear, you know, steady does it and you'll get there. And I realized that it was just by focusing on these tools that made me, that built my self-awareness and my self-compassion, most importantly, I was able to change habits, not just with my weight and food, but across my entire life. So now my whole mission is to just hand that stuff over and tell people, you know, this whole tough love mentality and like punishing yourself and assuming that you can't enjoy food and assuming that you have to be hungry all the time just is something of the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, that kind of just leads nicely into my second question, which is, you know, maybe when people think about this concept of being kind to themselves, right? And speaking to yourself like a friend, maybe people are like, well, I can't really see why that would, you know, help me in the weight loss and wellness journey. Maybe that would be helpful for, like you say, people who are struggling with addiction, or people who are, you know, building a business and facing setbacks, or people who are dealing with divorce or relationship problems. But why specifically do you think that self-kindness and speaking to yourself like a friend is so specifically important on the weight loss and wellness journey as well? I mean, of course, it is an up and down journey. It's not linear, but I'm curious to know like a little more about why you think it's so important, and how did it really like help you lose the weight and keep the weight off in such a happy and healthy way?
I think that's a really good question, because a lot of the time when we hear self-kindness, we think, well, that's doing whatever I want, whenever I want, right? So doesn't that extend to eating whatever I want the second that I want it, to as much as I want? And so how does the formula of weight loss come into that? And actually what I realize is, if we define kindness towards ourselves as making the choices that move us closer to our most valued long-term goals, then actually kindness is often making a decision today you'll be glad you made tomorrow. And kindness is believing in your capacity to sit through this short-term discomfort that comes with change. And, if we have a loved one and we want to give them advice, and a lot of this comes from diets, by the way, I think, like old school diets. If we want to give a loved one advice and they would say, hey, look, it's really important for me to finally love food and manage my weight in a way that I'm happy with, but I've fallen off track. If we think about the advice we would give them, we wouldn't be like, well, you know what, it's Wednesday, so you may as well just spiral until Monday, because that's the only day that you can start anything anyway. And actually, like, just exasperate the situation, beat yourself up about it, get really mad, moralize the food, cancel all your plans and isolate yourself because you shouldn't be seen in public, like all this stuff that we tell ourselves. And the kind choice is so often the choice that focuses less on thinking that the task ahead of you is easy, and more that focuses on believing in your capacity to do difficult things and your worthiness to achieve your long-term goals over a fix now. And we know that's what we would tell our loved ones. If you had a kid and they were like, I want to learn how to play football, but it means I have to get up at 6 a.m. You would be like, you can do that. You can get up at 6 a.m. You wouldn't be like, oh, that sounds early. Forget the football dream. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we need to kind of think, am I making the same decisions for myself? And also, that all or nothing, I've blown it, spiraling stuff. From a practical perspective, in terms of weight loss, it doesn't lend itself to common sense. Like, I've done something that I wish I hadn't done, for example, that moves me away from losing weight. And so in response, I'm going to do more of that.
Yeah.
I'm going to
get even further away.
Yeah, exactly.
It's completely counterproductive in every single aspect, but it is funny how for a lot of us, that is the natural kind of, feeling that you do want to do, it's,
I think that's what happens when you've been on like restrictive diets for a long time, because there's this mentality of, I'm not going to get to eat this again.
Yeah.
And when we haven't seen ourselves eat a diverse range of foods and still manage a weight that we're happy with, then why should we believe that we're going to eat that food again and enjoy it again? So of course, I've blown it.
Yeah. Or like that didn't work. So, screw it, throw in the towel.
Exactly. Which actually is totally counterproductive. If you were being paid to help someone lose weight, you wouldn't be like, oh, you had some chocolate, well, you should probably eat some more.
Yeah, I mean, look, well, this also brings me to my next question, because it is, when you break it down like that, it's so obvious how you should be treating yourself and how you should really, if you can be a great support system and a great person and, friend, wife, whatever it is to other people, why can't you do the same for yourself? And often, like, even myself, and I'll be completely vulnerable here, like, I absolutely love what you do. It resonates so much with me. I like preach it to other people. However, you have moments where it is very hard to pull yourself out of, not talking to yourself like a friend and beating yourself up and not being very kind to yourself. It is super challenging. I felt it with myself this very week, where I'm like, no, speak to yourself like a friend. And you almost immediately want to reject the idea because maybe you're feeling angry or you're feeling a certain way. And like you say, just throw in the towel, and not necessarily, you make the active decision to like not talk to yourself like that. So my question is, for someone who might be completely new to the concept, so like for myself, I'm not new to the concept and I can still find it challenging sometimes. For someone who's completely new to the concept and who maybe doesn't have at all much experience with speaking to themselves in such a kind way, what would be your top tips to help someone adopt this new behavior in the most, sustainable, achievable, bite-sized way?
First of all, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's important that people like us who are in this position where we're giving advice and stuff it's important that we're open about what we also struggle with. And you know what? There's a reason I came to find this information, and it's because I need it. So I'm by no means constantly just have this like Disney soundtrack in my head that everything I do is great. And I should, only last week, I snapped at my boyfriend, and it took me a really long time to forgive myself about some of the stuff I said. I was like, wow, I know it's not helpful. I know it's not going to get me anywhere, but I just kept ruminating over it. So it's a work in progress. I think the thing to do, first of all, is observe it and choose to acknowledge that you are having a conversation with yourself. And one of the greatest ways to turn up the volume is actually to do something difficult, to do a challenge voluntarily. You will notice, even if you said, I want to wake up 10 minutes earlier every day, that first 10 minutes, you would hear it. You would hear the negotiations and the caveats and whatever. Like as soon as you're challenged, the volume's turned up. So when the volume's turned up, there's an exercise that can help enormously, which is, first of all, sit down and write down the things that you would say to someone you love if you wanted them to succeed at something. And you would write things presumably like, you can do this, you're amazing, how can I help you? If you have a blip, it's just a blip, learn from it, come back. Think about all the other extraordinary things that you've managed to do in the past, forgive yourself quickly, all of that stuff. And then sit and write down the stuff you say to yourself when you fall off track with a plan of change. And look at the gulf between them, because I've been talking about this for years now, and I know that a number of people will say things like, I'm weak, I've blown it, just like my teacher told me when I was 10, I'm the kind of person who starts things and doesn't finish them, which is like the biggest self-fulfilling prophecy ever. And like all of that kind of stuff. And aside from the fact that we don't deserve to hear that, and we don't deserve to say that stuff to ourselves, it's unhelpful when we're trying to get something difficult done.
Yeah, it's the last thing you need. It's wildly unhelpful. In fact, back in the day when I started this job and I hadn't spoken to thousands of people and seen that it works, with my own eyes, I used to say to people, okay, imagine someone you love. What would you tell them if they've fallen off track? And now I could go in and say, hey, if I was paying you $100,000 to help someone you hate get to their goal and stay there, you wouldn't abuse them. Wow, you would want them to feel calm and positive and resilient so that they can do difficult things. You'd want them to believe in themselves. So aside from the fact that we don't deserve to hear that stuff, it also doesn't get us to where we want to be faster. And the other thing is, you will notice that there's a departure from common sense a lot of the time when we tell ourselves, blow it, spiral, do stuff that makes it worse. And so when you've seen the difference between the way you speak to other people who, by your own admission, you want to motivate and care about, and the way you speak to yourself, look at the way you speak to yourself and ask yourself, where did this come from? Because it didn't come from nowhere. And the difficult thing is, a lot of the time in our lives, like where you have a professional resume, for example, you don't mind updating it and saying, hey, you know what? I used to call myself like, I wasn't a good leader. And then I did this training and I had these experiences and now I'm a good leader. So that's how I think of myself. When it comes to our personal development, we don't do that. And so a lot of the time, it's just about updating it and saying, hey, I don't deserve to hear this. I never did anyway, but I definitely don't deserve to hear it. Where did this come from? What program am I working here? And a lot of the time you'll be like, that's what my old teacher used to say. Or basically it'll come from people who don't matter and certainly shouldn't be informing the way that you conduct your life. And so then you can be more compassionate about where it's come from and start debating with it. Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And I guess just to touch on what you were saying about, writing things down, like I think in general, that's a really fantastic way to kind of, get negative thoughts off your mind and put them somewhere else, put them on a piece of paper, whatever it might be. But my question is, like, if someone feels like they're in a very negative state and all they can do is observe the thought, but like even writing something down, they're not even at that point where they feel like they want, when you can feel very like tense and you don't even, there's a moment like, that you feel like you can't even help yourself. You can't take yourself out of it. So there's something that has to happen before in between observing and then writing things down. And I'm curious what if you have a tip on what, like, if someone is feeling quite stuck or low and they like writing something down doesn't even feel like an option because maybe they're thinking, oh, this is silly, this is stupid, I'm not even going to do that. Is there something that's even more basic that you could think could be effective and like an interesting gateway to this world of being kind to yourself when you're feeling really not in that state of mind?
This is a great question. I'm loving this.
I'm sorry, this one wasn't on the list. But
I think it's fantastic.
Made me think about it.
I want to stay on my toes. What you do is you say it aloud. Say it aloud.
Yeah.
The same thing I do with my anxiety. Like, I suffer with anxiety and I worry about things and whether they're going to happen and things that have happened before and whether they're going to screw me over or whatever, anxiety does to you. And I hear it aloud. And there's something very powerful about just saying to yourself, I'm going to verbalize in a way that I can hear the things that I'm saying to myself. And that serves a couple of purposes. First of all, you realize more objectively that if someone was saying that to you, you would have way more compassion for them than you're having for yourself. And the other thing is when you speak aloud, you have to make sense. So you actually focus in on the thing you're actually worrying about, as opposed to like, oh, I'm worried that I ate this or I did this. And also when I was 12, this happened. And also I haven't done the laundry. And also like, you actually have to you have to build a narrative that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so it helps enormously to bring you back to common sense and to bring you back to compassion.
Amazing. That is a brilliant answer. And I guess there's also an element of like, even though it's just in front of yourself, you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable in that moment to actually speak out loud. It's not the most common thing to do, to kind of speak out loud and talk to yourself. And I imagine from that process of allowing yourself to feel a little bit vulnerable, you kind of break down the barriers of yourself a little bit, right?
Yeah. And it's just it's just never as bad as you think it is.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's I'm going to try that out. I love that. Okay. So we've obviously spoken about being kind to ourselves, which is super, super important. And this week at WW we're talking a lot about doing WW with non-WW members and, going on this weight loss and wellness journey, potentially on your own with people who may not understand what you're doing or fully support what you're doing. And my question is like, how do you think we can practice kindness to those people who might not understand what we're trying to achieve and maybe pull us away from the goals that we are, even if people are not doing it consciously, but you know what people, have a glass of wine and do this and do that, which is all fine. We can drink wine, but there are some people who may not fully get it. So I think in the same way we can practice kindness to ourselves by not necessarily isolating ourselves from people whilst we go down this road. How can we also be kind to people who may not fully get it, what we're doing? or they don't, the kind of people who don't want you to change,
Yeah. I think it's about communicating. If you feel you are in a position where you need to justify it, which, we live in the real world. I think it's about communicating. Look, I'm not this isn't just about how I look. This is about me not obsessing about food every day. This is about me making food my friend. This isn't actually an unlearning process. The fact that they've gone down the WW route as opposed to a restrictive route or something where you cut out a food entirely or you're scared of it is testament to the fact that they are trying to love food again. And a lot of people who've been trying to lose weight for a very long time, the thing that really people don't understand is that they've stopped enjoying food. It's become what they obsess over every single day. And they're either gaining or losing enormous amounts of weight at one time. So I think rather than looking at it as a weight loss program, you could be framing it as, well, I'm retraining myself to love food again, to not be scared of food, to look forward to my meals, but not agonize over them and, not moralize food. This is an unlearning process around my food habits, the byproduct of which happens to be for my body weight loss. That's
amazing. I love that. Just reframing what it is and also explaining to people that when, your happiest self, your friendships are better, your relationships are better, like everything is better. So you're right. I think communication is key, right? Just verbalizing what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I love that, reframing it. You're learning to love food again and not have this, conflicted relationship with it.
Absolutely.
So,
And the irony, of
yeah.
course, which I had to explain to a lot of people, is that when I'm not at a weight that I'm happy with, when I'm over a weight that I'm happy with, it's not because I'm enjoying food. It tends to be because I'm not enjoying food. I'm restricting and I'm binging and I'm acting like a dieter. So it's like saying I'm trying to act like I never went on a diet in the first place, and that requires some training.
It's so interesting. It's so true. I mean, I'm laughing because it makes sense. Like I hear it loud and clear. So my last question, I think we kind of, the question was, what are your tips when negative self-talk starts to creep in? Now, I think we did kind of touch on that before. And the second part of the question is it easy to revert back to kindness, or is it a skill that can be built on? So I guess, is it, when we want to try ideally get people on this way of life, is it good to know that there is a starting point? You can be a pro at it, but there is, you can start somewhere really basic, and is it a struggle? Does it become super easy? Does it become second nature? Or is it something that you've got to work on every day, the same way we work on other things?
You know what? First of all, I always tell people, I've written this book, right? And it's filled with tools that I use on myself too. There will be people who read my book who are starting at the beginning of the process, are in a stronger position than I am now. So you've got to start from where you're at.
Yeah.
And I was someone who found it immensely difficult to be nice to myself. So compared to where I was then, I've transformed. But compared to where I am, compared to someone who never had that problem in the first place, or just barely had it, or wasn't as anxious as I am, or whatever else, or had a different upbringing, they're going to be ahead of the game in that sense. So for me, it's more of a practice. The thing that, if you had told me originally, look, being nicer to yourself is just something you deserve, my self-esteem was so low that I would have been like, yeah, that's for people on Instagram. Whereas now what I realize is, not only does it get you to where you want to be a lot more quickly, but I can also put forward a compelling case now, having used it on myself, for changing the way you speak to yourself, because it's just fact checking. It's not, you're bringing it up to date. So if you have an internal debate and you hear something like, oh, well, you better quit because you're the sort of person who starts things and doesn't finish them, gently question that.
Yeah.
What were the last few things I started and finished? Is this true? Is this outdated? Is this fair? And debate with it. What I cannot stand is on Instagram when someone will do, some influencer will put a tile up that says, as soon as a negative thought comes in, just replace it with a positive one. And it's like, oh, brilliant. If you know how to do that, you should be on the news. Well, you're a genius. So I think that's it. Look at it as a fact-checking process, and look at some of the stuff that you're telling yourself that's unhelpful and untrue as fake news or like outdated news. And you're just like collecting more data. And what that also does is it also puts you on a mission to notice your achievements and notice the amazing things you're doing and the difficult things you're doing, in a bid to change the way you speak to yourself about what you're capable of.
Yeah, I love that. Fact checking. I mean, that's one thing when you talk about actually habits and, what's something that you could do every day habitually to help you really start thinking in this way as much as possible. That's probably just one thing, like just constantly like checking yourself, and just observing the thoughts as much as you can. Okay, great. So Naomi has asked a question saying, there is a lot of baggage from growing up about being told to nurture others at our own expense. How would you tackle ingrained habits?
I think, it's a cliche now in self-help, but the oxygen mask thing is really true. When I speak to people who I love, all I want for them is for them to be good to themselves. It makes them better towards me. It makes it so that they are more available, so that they are more confident, so that they're happier and calmer and more positive. And therefore that has a ripple effect on their entire lives. And when I speak to clients and I ask them, what in coaching clients, I'll say to them, like, what do you wish most for this person in your life, the person you love? Without doubt, they'll say, I wish they took better care of themselves. I wish they were nicer to themselves. I wish they liked themselves more. You know, across the board, we see the value in it. Even if it's selfish, I would go as far as saying it's almost selfish to be like, please go take care of yourself so that you can be better to me. And I think the other thing around, you know, it isn't easy though, because changing the boundaries, when someone's used to you putting them before you, they're not going to like it. And so I think a lot of the time we do the self-help stuff and we do these talks and we watch the TED Talks and we think, that's it, tomorrow I'm going to change. And we forget that we're talking about real people in the real world, and not everyone is reading self-help and joining communities like this. And so I see a lot of value in transparency. I see a lot of value in just saying, look, I'm trying to take better care of myself. And that means I don't have unlimited capacity. And one of my main worries was that I'm going to neglect you.
Yeah.
I think that that can go really far.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And that's a brilliant answer. So thank you for that. But, you know, we've obviously spoken a lot about how to deal with, you know, negative self-talk in the more like intense way. But let's say we've got some members listening to this and they don't necessarily have the most negative thoughts, and, you know, they're okay with speaking to themselves relatively kindly. So I think, you know, there's obviously in life, there are people on either side of the spectrum. Is there one tip that you would give, like a daily ritual or something that you could do when you wake up in the morning, just to like kickstart yourself into that way of thinking, right? So like you open your eyes and you know, it's something that you do or say or whatever it is. I mean, I'm sure you've got the answer, but just to get people, whether you're feeling crap or great or whatever it is, just something that you can do every day, like as you say, to build, it's a habit, right? So how can we just try build that every day, regardless of how we might be feeling?
Great question. I think when you get up in the morning, whether it's talking aloud in the shower, whether it's writing it in a notepad or writing it on the notes part of your phone, or what I've been doing recently with dictating, which I'm obsessed with now, it's all about saying, guess in the morning what things are likely to make you want to abandon your plan. Guess in the morning what's likely to make you doubt yourself. You may be looking at your calendar and thinking, oh, I've got a meeting with that person who's really passive aggressive, and then apparently it's going to rain today, so I'm probably less likely to want to go to the gym, and and decide in the morning how you're going to respond when those tests present themselves. Before the day has had a chance to get to you, guess. And the interesting thing with that is not only that it gives you a moment to go, I guess this would happen. Yeah. That must mean that different versions of me are making different decisions throughout the day. But there's also a kind of a smuggery that comes with being that preemptive about yourself and so self-aware. And, you know, I learned this because in addiction treatment, there's a lot of this stuff about like handing yourself over to higher power and stuff like that. And I've seen how powerful it is to say, right now, I don't feel fully equipped to make this decision. So I'm going to hand it over to something that I think is wiser than me. And I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about the version of you that woke up in the morning and wanted you to go to bed proud of yourself. That's the version of you that should be making the decisions throughout the day. Yeah, no, that's brilliant, because that version exists. Like, that's why we're all here, right? We have that person, you know, that we all have dualities, but that person is very much there. So I love that, to kind of preempt what might happen and you're prepared to deal with it, you know, either way. I think that's brilliant. I will be doing that in the shower tomorrow morning. Well, I absolutely love that. I just, love everything that you have to say. And it all makes it makes such good sense. You know, there's nothing that you're saying that you really need to try wrap your head around. It's just brilliant. It really is. So we will continue spreading the word of the kindness method to all of our members. And we're really, really so grateful that you joined us this evening. Thank you, Nat. I really, really appreciate it. But yes, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Have a beautiful evening. Shahroo, thank you so much. Thank you. And Nat, we'll speak soon. Take care. Bye. Bye.